with the DNA. So it is referred to as open chromatin. So this open and closed chromatin is studied by studying two different types of data that we get from the different techniques that are available, and the insights that we get from these techniques are that we can get to know the functional roles of the transcription factor binding events, the sequence motifs that are important for the binding, and the regulatory networks that control the gene expression. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the techniques that we can use to determine the localization of a protein on the genome. So these techniques are protein specific, and you would need a protein of interest for doing this type of techniques. So if you want to know that where your protein of interest binds on the genome, then you would want to do these experimental techniques. So I'm going to talk about 3 of these techniques, and I'm not going to go into the details of these, but just to build a background, I'm going to explain a brief introduction. So this first one is ChIP-seq. So this is the most commonly used technique which assesses the localization of chromatin binding proteins. And in this, first the cross-linking of the proteins to the DNA is done, and after this, the cell lysis and sonication is done. So, after the cell lysis and sonication, we have the 2 types of sites where the transcription factor is bound to the DNA, and wherever the transcription factor is not bound to the DNA. And on the basis of that, we get 2 types of sites, and after the digestion of proteins and digestion of DNA fragments that are not bound by the protein, we get the DNA fragments that are specifically bound to our protein of interest. So those fragments are subjected to deep sequencing. So the second one is DAM-ID. In this, DAM is DNA adenine methyltransferase. So this is an enzyme. This enzyme is fused to the transcription factor of your interest, and this is transfected to the cells. This is transfected to the cells, and wherever this transcription factor will bind, the DAM will methylate the adenines in that DNA fragment. So after this, when you get the DNA and you digest it with another enzyme, that is DPN1. So DPN1, what it does is it cuts the DNA, it digests the DNA wherever the DNA is not methylated. So you would get 2 types of sites that in this step, that the one that have the adenines methylated and they're bound by the transcription factor, and the ones that are not having the adenines methylated. So after isolating the DNA fragments that have the transcription factor bound to it, and they will not get digested because they will have adenines methylated, and the DPN1 specifically digests the unmethylated sequences. So you get those sequences, the methylated ones, and you subject them to the deep sequencing. And the third one is the cut and run, that is cleavage under targets, and release using nuclease. And this is basically a technique that uses a recombinant protein A that is fused with a micrococal nuclease protein. So this micrococal nuclease protein is from the Staphylococcus aureus. So this recombinant protein A that is fused with the micrococal nucleus protein is the one that is going to recognize the antibody that binds to your protein of interest. So wherever your protein of interest is, you will incubate it with the antibody that is recognizing it. And this recombinant protein that is used in this technique will recognize the antibody bound to your transcription factor or your protein of interest. And on the basis of that, we can get to know the regions, the specific regions where your transcription factor is going to bind. Okay, so those techniques were for finding the binding sites of specific protein of interest. But if we want to know where the genome is accessible and where the genome is not accessible, then we have different types of techniques that are not transcription factor specific. So you do not need to fuse your transcription factor with any enzyme in these type of techniques. So here 4 type of techniques are shown, that is FAIR-seq, DNA-seq, MNase-seq, and ATAC-seq. So all of these techniques as shown target specific parts of the genome, and the DNA is hypersensitivity assay. It uses the non-specific DNA endonuclease DNase 1. So it cuts the DNA wherever the protein is not bound to it, or wherever the genome is open. So the second one is FAIR-seq. So what it does is it recognizes if the DNA is bound to the histones or if the DNA is not bound to the histones. It does not necessarily target the open DNA, but it just differentiates between histone and non-histone occupied regions of the genome. And the third one is MNase-seq. It uses microfocal nuclease, and like the previous technique of cut and run, it had a protein of interest fused with MNase. Here there is no protein of interest fused with MNase, and MNase will provide you with the specific regions of DNA which are not occupied by any protein or histone, any protein, or they are not in the open region. And as it has an endonuclease and exonuclease both activity, it will provide you with the regions that are occupied by histones only in the genome. And the fourth one is ATAC-seq. It involves the use of hyperactive TN5 transposase. So what TN5 transposase does is it inserts the sequencing adapters into the regions that are open in the chromatin, and wherever those regions, wherever those sequencing adapters are bound, the sequencing is done. And this is one of the newest techniques in the sequencing and for knowing the genome accessibility, and it is quite widely used because it is very simple and it has a very fast experimental procedure, and it can help to you. It can be used on single cell as well as frozen tissues. So it is better than other three techniques that are. So this is one more technique that I will talk about. It is basically it is chromatin endogenous cleavage followed by sequencing. In this, it is basically combination of the MNase cut and run and the genome accessibility techniques. So in this technique, what is done is that the chromatin protein that you have, that your protein of interest, it is fused with an MNase, and this chromatin protein fused MNase is wherever it bounds to the wherever it binds to the genome, the MNase, it cuts the genome there. And this is different from the other techniques that are mentioned for the protein localization, in such that it is calcium dependent. So it needs calcium so that MNAs can act and MNAs can cleave the DNA. So this I am talking here about because I will be talking about fast and slow sites later, and this is the technique which gave the information about the temporal classes of binding sites. So this is a technique which gives the single base pair resolution for transcription factor binding sites, and the data that I have used in my work is taken from this paper for the transcription factors ABF1, RAF1 and REV1. So what do we learn from these high throughput experiments about the transcriptional dynamics? So there are two things. First is the sequential binding of transcription factors that bind to the closed chromatin, and they open it for accessibility to the other transcription factors. So there is never a situation where a transcription factor is going to bind to the DNA and help in gene regulation by itself. So there is always a cooperativity of different transcription factors when it comes to the gene regulation. So basically this says that there are different transcription factors which come after one another and help in the gene regulation. The second is that not all of the binding sites are occupied at the same time for a transcription factor. So there are different types of binding sites for a specific transcription factor that are bound by that transcription factor at different times. So how the sequential events of transcription factor binding are mediated by open and closed chromatin. So here we can differentiate the transcription factors into three types based on their ability to bind to the open or closed chromatin. So pioneer transcription factors are the ones that can bind to the closed chromatin, and they help in genome reorganization so that they can open the chromatin and the other transcription factors can come and act or bind on their binding site. So these are different from the other two transcription factors because they are going to bind to the closed chromatin. So the other two types are the settler transcription factors and the migrant transcription factors. They do not have any ability to bind to the inaccessible region of the chromatins. So settler transcription factors are going to bind to their binding site if it is lying in the open chromatin. Whereas the migrant transcription factor is more different from both of these in such that it needs other cofactors for it to bind to its own transcription factor binding site. So this type of characterization is associated with the transcription factors, and it basically applies to all of its binding sites, and we call it the temporal cooperativity between transcription factors. So the sequential events of transcription factor binding, they are mediated by early and late binding patterns of the same transcription factor. So earlier we told how the sequential binding of one transcription factor and the other transcription factor are mediated by open and closed chromatin. Here we are saying that how one transcription factor has two different types of binding sites that have sequential event in the transcription factor binding. One it binds to at the early stage, and one it binds to at the later stage of the reaction. So these are slow and fast sites. So the check that is chromatin endogenous cleavage that I mentioned before, it is controllable, as in the MNA's activity. It depends on when you give the signal of the calcium to know the MNAs to act on the DNA for cleavage. So making the use of this inducible nature, it was found that there are two different types of sites for one transcription factor, and they can be partitioned into two distinct temporal classes. So is there any relationship between transcription factor binding and the temporal binding patterns? So it is speculated that the transcription factor binding sites that are rapidly cleaved. So it means that the ones that are coming early in the stage in the chemical reaction, they contain highly scoring motifs, and they represent the direct high affinity binding of transcription factor to DNA. Whereas the slow cleaved binding sites, they had the low scoring motifs, and they are basically loci that are transiently sampled by transcription factor during diffusion. So the binding of these slow sites may be mediated by sliding due to favorable shape profiles instead of sequence motifs. So yes, so I'm going to talk about the fast and slow sites now. So what are these fast and slow sites? So when the check-seq was carried out, it was known that, as I mentioned, that it was known that there were two types of temporal class of transcription factor binding sites. So first of all, when we get a set of binding sites, we like to know what are the sequential properties of those binding sites. So the binding sites were predicted for their motif, and the motif scores were studied, and it was known that the sites that appeared earlier in the reaction, they had a motif enriched. So they had a motif enriched for the specific transcription factor for which the binding site came from. And the slow sites, they did not have any specific motif for the transcription factor for which the binding sites came from, but they were motif depleted, and they appeared later in the reaction. So these are the detailed temporal dynamics of slow and fast sites. So it basically shows that how many number of sites are coming at which time point in the reaction of the chromatin endogenous cleavage. As you can see, this data represents this plot represents the data for three type of three transcription factors, that is ABF1, RAP1, and REB1. So you can see with the progression, first there were no such enrichment of binding sites, but with around 30 seconds, there was a progression of a lot of binding sites, and these type of binding sites slowly started to diminish, and they just faded away until 2.5 minutes. And after that, a second type of binding site came into picture, and they started to get accumulated, and they were there until for the 20 minutes of the sample, 20 minutes of the reaction that the chromatin endogenous cleavage was performed for. So as you can see that this red and blue are basically the motif scores and the Z scores. So you can see that with the time progression from 10 to 30 seconds, the fast sites appeared, and from after 5 minutes, the slow sites started to appear. And as I have mentioned that these fast sites had an enriched motif for the specific transcription factor, whereas the slow sites did not have any motif enriched for the same transcription factor. So after the sequences were studied, the motifs were the motif enriched and the motif depleted regions. How could they bind to the same transcription factor if they did not have the same sequential properties for the binding motifs? So the DNA shape came into picture. So is there a possibility that the DNA binding sites, they may have different sequential properties, but they have same DNA shape profiles? So the DNA shape profiles of those sequences were studied, and it was found out that the fast and slow sites, they have similar DNA shape profiles, and these were also compared with the random sequences, and so hence it was hypothesized that maybe shape plays role when a transcription factor binds to the binding site of it more than how much sequence plays role. So in the data that was reported, the conformational parameters that were considered were 4 in number, and hence we moved on to reinvestigating the DNA shape profiles of these fast and slow sites, and we used 13 different conformational parameters by using the DynaSeq tool. So what do the DNA shape profiles of these fast and slow sites tell us about? So here you can see that I've shown 3 different type of plots. So the upper one plot is showing the the average values of a conformational parameter. Here I'm showing for the shear conformational parameter. So the average values of shear conformational parameter per position using a smoothing window of 5. So as you can see, there does not seem to be much of a difference between the slow and fast side. But if we try to plot the average values for each position without using the smoothing window, then we can see that there are small peaks and depressions in the DNA shape profiles around the motif site. So for plotting this, we use the average values per position. So we do not know if there is a specific difference between these fast and slow sites as such, or if that difference is significant enough. So what we did is we took the position-wise values of all of the binding sites that were available to us for a specific conformational parameter, and we plotted the box plots of those values. So as you can see that this is the magnified version of this is the third plot is for -10 to +10 position for the ABF1 transcription factor, whereas the other two plots that are shown is for the 100 base pair, that is -48 to +48. So this box plot, as you can see, that around the motif positions -5 and the +5, there seems to be a difference between fast and slow binding sites. And as the notches are not overlapping, there can be a difference between the fast and slow site, which actually plays a role which actually can be used to differentiate between the DNA shape profiles of these fast and slow sites. So we are still figuring out solidifying, saying that yes, there is a difference, because we do not know how significant this difference is. But yes, we are still working on this to say that yes, we can differentiate the fast and slow sites based on their difference, or if that is because of the random nature by chance, or if that is because the fast and slow sites are actually similar in the DNA shape profiles, or they're different. So then we went on to the analysis of the conservation scores for the fast and slow sites. So this shows the conservation score analysis for 3 different transcription factors that were analyzed, that is ABF1, RAP1 and REB1. So basically these plots show that the conservation scores for the ABF1 and RAP1 has a difference between the fast and slow sites, whereas the REB1 are more similar to each other. And if we look closely, then we can see that at around the motif position, there is a lot of difference between the conservation scores for RAP1 as compared to the difference between the fast and slow sites conservation scores in the flanking region. They're more similar in the flanking region. So why did we do this conservation score analysis is that the binding sites that are obtained are basically from the same genome. So we wanted to see if we can say that there is an importance of these binding sites in different genomes. So we wanted to know if these binding sites are conserved across genomes. So this can give more information about the importance of these binding sites. So these results are contributed by Dana Mary Varghese. She is a PhD student in my lab. Now, the functional enrichment of the fast and slow sites. So basically, enrichment analysis is based on the functional annotation of the differentially expressed genes, and we can use the functional enrichment analysis for finding out if those genes are associated with a certain biological process or molecular function or pathway. And the different functional annotation might indicate different functional role of the genes that are contributing in the different sets. So here what we did is that we took the fast and slow sites, and for both of these we mapped the binding sites to their nearest downstream gene, and we predicted the gene ontology and pathway for these downstream genes. And after that we are trying to do the comparative analysis for these fast and slow sites. So we can say if one type of sites, for example fast sites, are enriched in a specific type of pathway or in a specific type of biological processes as compared to slow, which are having different functional roles in a different type of pathway, or if those enrichments are, one is higher in the cascade and one is lower in the cascade. So we are trying to know about this. So that is why we are trying to do the functional enrichment. So when we compared the pathways that were enriched for the fast and slow sites, we saw that there were different pathways that were enriched for the genes that are there for the fast and for the slow sites. So you can see that there are some pathways that are common, common for both of the fast and slow sites, and there are some pathways that are different for both of the sites. So currently, we are focusing on making a biological inference of these binding site enrichment for different pathways, and we are trying to know if we can say that slow sites are involved in different type of functions in the gene regulation as compared to the fast sites. And the tools that are commonly used in the transcription factor binding analysis. So these are the different tools that I had used for doing my work that I have done till now. So the NGS data analysis, it can be used by using Bowtie, BedTools, SAMtools. These are the tools that you use for the manipulation of the data that is there for the binding sites. And then you can use peak calling, MAX for peak calling. You have a set of binding sites for a specific transcription factor. Then if you want to know where the transcription factor binds, and you would want to map those onto the genome and find where the score is highest. So you can use the MAX tool for peak calling. Then if you want to predict the motif of a specific transcription factor, and then you can use mean or Homer. And for motif comparison, I use TomTom. If you want to, if you have motifs from different genomes and you want to compare what motif from one genome is most similar to the motif from another genome, another species of your interest, then you can compare those motifs. And for motif scanning, if you have DNA and you have a motif and you want to know where that motif is lying onto the DNA, then you can use FIMO. And for enrichment analysis, you can use David, GREAT, or GSEA. So all of these have different input requirements, and they can be used for the functional annotation of your binding sites. So thank you.
So done, Manisha?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Manisha, for the excellent presentation. So very nice overview of how to analyze transcription factor binding sites and what are different types of transcription binding sites like slow and fast, and how we can analyze those. So let us take some questions. So I have one question from Praveen Abdul Hanif. So I request Praveen, so please go ahead asking question.
Good evening. Thank you, sir. So my question is, there any bioinformatics tools to predict the protein location? Because the protein may be an enzyme or maybe an transcription factor, whatever maybe. Mostly the transcription factor present in the nucleus alone. So my question is so generalized. Is there any omics tool to predict protein location in the cell?
Protein?
Protein localization. How to predict protein localization? Is there any bioinformatics tool?
So protein localization, for that you would need the genomic details of that. Like you would have to use the data from the experimental techniques that I mentioned, and using those data sets that are available for you, what you can do is you can take those binding sites and for the specific transcription factor or specific protein of interest, you have different data sets that are available in the different ENCODE or the GEO that you can take.
So I think there are quite a few databases on websites and tools are available. For example, there is a target P that you just need a sequence of the protein and it can predict. And there are some specific tools also available. If like it is nuclear localized, there is special tool. And if it is like localized in outer membrane or membrane specific protein. So there are several tools available. You can just Google it out and you can find a list of those. So now I'm coming to the next question from Leelavati. Leelavati Narlikar, please go ahead for your question.
Yeah, I was muted. So, okay. No, very nice talk. Very well done. So I was just wondering what, since you're saying that it's the structure that is determining the slow sites, maybe you should look, or maybe you've done that already, look at conservation, not in terms of traditional sequence-based conservation, but see whether the structure is conserved and not the sequence. When you're looking at other yeast, this is yeast, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you
basically
showed ABF1, there was like really less conservation in the slow sites, right? I thought the conservation profile was much lower for the ABF1 in the
yes, fast and slow sites there was a difference. So yes, low conservation.
But then if you're saying that, I think you're getting at whether the slow sites are even functional, right? That's the question, right? So when you're looking at
we are basically we basically want to know if there is actually a difference between fast and slow sites, and if there is a difference between fast and slow sites in terms of DNA shape, or if we can explain their behavior in like temporal binding of transcription factor binding sites in terms of conservation, or if they have different functional annotation.
Correct. So, but I'm saying that when you're looking at conservation,
that's an interesting suggestion. If I can intervene, yes, that's an interesting suggestion, and we would like to look into this. Just one little thing addition here is that structures are generally less conserved, and sequence conservation is definitely more sensitive to identify functions.
Right.
This is something worth looking at.
I mean, if you're looking at homologous regions, and then you can just look in
homology as well. So structure generally, structures evolve much more slowly than the sequences, and but looking into this, because mostly all the motif generation, etc., are done by the sites collected from the same genome.
Correct.
And the same thing is done over the multiple across the evolutionary species, or so again you can generate these conservations from very evolutionary distant patterns and also evolutionary closed patterns. So those variations are also, so we have tried those things. So all those data are not presented. But yes, your suggestion is quite interesting, and we would like to look into this.
So next question is from Nicoletta. Professor Nicoletta.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Manisha. I just have a question about cut and run, because you showed that MNAs can basically cut in between nucleosomes. So if you fuse cut and run to protein A, then protein A will go where the transcription factor is, right? But then we'll also go where the space is in between nucleosome to cut. So I was wondering if when you do a cut and run experiments, compared to a ChIP-seq experiments, you can also have an overview of chromatin accessibility in general.
So basically, MNAs is in cut and run. You're comparing the cut and run in ChIP-seq, right?
Yeah.
So yes. So in the cut and run, the MNase is fused to a recombinant protein that will recognize the antibody that recognizes your transcription factor protein. So when the transcription factor that is bound on the genome and it is bound to the antibody, and that antibody is recognized by the recombinant A protein bound to the MNase. So that is not able to, give you a broader picture of genome accessibility, but it only gives you the picture where the specific transcription factor protein binds to the genome, not of the whole genome accessibility profile.
Okay, so there is no MNAs that can also go where, I mean, even if it's fused to protein A, if there is a lot of MNAs, then I would expect it to also go doing its job independent of the protein A, and then because the transcription factor will be bound to a certain number of sites. So the protein A will bind to the transcription factor, and if there is an excess of MNAs protein A, then it can go around and cut across nucleosomes.
So if you
can do it in general, I mean, but when you do this for ChIP-seq, you are already using an antibody, so it will not give you a whole genome perspective. It will give you only perspectives of sites which are bound by that particular transcription factor. Is this right, Manisha?
Yes, sir.
I think we have last question from Rita. So Rita, you can ask your question. Rita Sharma.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay.
You are the one.
Okay. So Manisha, I have a question regarding the time series experiment data that you have used for your study, because what I see is that the time ranges from a few seconds up to 20 minutes to the max, right? So what I'm wondering is that the way you define as fast and slow sites is within this time frame, whereas we know that transcription factors can take hours to find the binding site, and that would also depend on the genome size. For example, in yeast, there are examples of transcription factors that take from 5 to 10 hours to just find the site. And in higher genomes, it may take even to 24 hours. So I'm just wondering, is your classification into fast and slow site, is it mixing all the fast sites, or is it, I mean, how real the classification is?
So it is not mixing all of the fast sites, because when you talk about the temporal patterns of the binding sites, at first the fast sites start to appear and then they diminish, and after a certain time gap the slow sites start to appear. So you cannot say that all of these are the fast sites, because they have different sequence properties as well, and they have different time frames in which they appear and diminish. And the question that you're saying of 20 minutes, yes, there is an issue, and there is a concern. We were also concerned about this when we were trying to figure out if they have different functional implications, because the time frame that is considered in vivo is much larger than that is given here. So yes, that concern is ours as well. So we are also, yes.
So maybe just another.
I don't know. I mean, can you confirm that the time taken by transcription factors to bind in yeast is also a matter of hours?
Yeah, there are some examples where it takes up to 5 hours. I mean, I know up to 5 to 10 hours. There are some papers which write that.
And also, I think it depends on the region where the binding site is. If it is directly accessible or if it is not accessible, there is a crowding of multiple proteins. So I think it depends on that.
Right.
So I think with this, we would like to thank you once again, Manisha. So very good presentation. So now it's the time for the next presentation, the third and last presentation of this session by Dr. Swaroop Parida. I hope he's here.